I was 26 years old, fit, doing all my exercise, playing sports and whatnot. I did not think that could be something serious. The doctors told me that I have this EGFR exon 19 mutation, and then there is a treatment available for that. That was kind of good news. But then immediately the bad news was that the drug costs a lot of money and I might need to take it for the rest of my life. And now the question was, can I afford it? So when the doctor said that, oh, next week you're going to start chemotherapy, my first question, literally my first question was, am I going to lose my hair? And then the doctor literally just laughed and said that, I think you should be worried about more important things than your hair. And that put me off. And then I stopped asking stupid questions. So all of this was just making me feel that how can a world be so cruel that there is a treatment out there, but I cannot get it?
You just heard from Rasika. I'm Yvonne Diaz. I'm a co-founder of Oncogene Cancer Research. I'm also living with stage 4 lung cancer. In this Patient Voices episode, Rasika walks us through that diagnosis, the day she asked her doctor the wrong question, what it's like trying to access life-saving treatment in India, and what her life looks like today in Oxford in the UK. The Patient Voices podcast is proudly supported by Amgen, Nuvalent, Takeda, and Thermo Fisher Scientific, who have no editorial control over the contents.
Rasika, it was really nice to meet you recently, and I'd like to just dive straight into your diagnosis. Can you let us know what was going on and how did you know something was wrong?
Hi, Yvonne. Thank you so much for having me. So it started with a cough, and because it was just a cough, and I was 26 years old, fit, doing all my exercise, playing sports and whatnot, I did not think that could be something serious. So I treated myself for around 4 weeks, just took some cough syrups. The cough wouldn't go for 4 weeks, which started alarming me. And then I went to a doctor, but even they weren't alarmed because even they thought that why would a 26-year-old be worried about just a cough? They suggested me some things, a little better medication, I would say, but it still was pretty similar than what I was taking already. And then, yeah, I think it was just some instinct that I had inside that this does not seem to be just cough. And I just wanted to get it properly checked. So I kept pushing my doctors to do an X-ray. And then when we got an X-ray, it was very clear on the X-ray itself that there is a patch in my left lung. And now I can say thankfully that something was picked up on the X-ray, because if it wasn't, I can see how difficult it would have been. But because we could see that patch, that at least initiated the doctors to think about, oh, what this could be. And then there were a list of possibilities. Some were saying that it would be something related to COVID, might have been something latent, it's just there, I don't need to worry. Some said it could be tuberculosis because I was in India and tuberculosis is a far common diagnosis in India. So then I was put on a lot of tests for tuberculosis, sputum tests. I was expected to get sputum tested, but there was no sputum because by that time I just started having dry cough. So I think it was a lot of going back and forth with the medical team, just trying to make them defer me to a better diagnostic test because none of the things we were doing were giving anything. And then finally they agreed. And this was all, I guess, 2, 3 weeks of a time, I guess. And then they agreed to do a CT scan. And the CT scan pretty much showed that there is something more significant than tuberculosis or just a patch. And they could see that it has spread to some of my nodules. And then we went for a biopsy, which confirmed the diagnosis. So I think, yeah, a lot of back and forth with the medical team. And then finally coming to a diagnosis, I think after a month of different kinds of tests. So yeah, that's the story of the diagnosis.
Right. Well, and I think it's also important to maybe tell our watchers about your profession because you were working in a hospital setting, which probably helped you quite a bit for someone your age, it's not easy to get diagnosed. It's not easy to be taken seriously. And in a way, this also helped you get through the system a little quicker, perhaps, than most people might.
I would say there are two sides to it because I was working as a physiotherapist in that same hospital where I was doing all these tests. I knew people, I could directly go to them and say that, can we please do this? So that definitely gave me an advantage of speaking to the doctors. I know how daunting it is because doctors don't really just listen to what you have to say, right? But then I think the other side to it is that because I was a part of the medical team, nobody was treating me as a patient anymore. So I was treated more like a professional who knows things. And a diagnosis like cancer, I don't think so anybody is prepared for that, no matter how big of a medical professional you are. So I think that was the downside of it because I couldn't get treatment like a patient who would be emotionally vulnerable hearing that they have something so big. So yeah, that was the downside. But of course, I did get the diagnostics and also getting things done a bit faster because I got referrals from everyone I knew. So that definitely made things faster for me.
I'm glad it did lead to things being fast because we do hear in many countries and not just in India, it could be very slow to get through the system, especially when you are younger. So, how did you finally learn that you had lung cancer? And did they talk about biomarkers or anything more? How did you learn this?
So this goes back to the point I was talking that I wasn't really treated as a patient. So up until now, everything was happening with a general physician because I was not in a cancer center. I was just getting all of these tests done with the help of a general physician. So once we got the CT scan and the biopsy done and the results came out, this was a general physician telling me that this is what you have. And I know there are certain rules and regulations for breaking the news around this, but I don't think so that was followed because I was sitting with a bunch of people, all of whom I was working with, like working as a professional. So I wasn't comfortable in that room at all because as soon as I heard the diagnosis, my first instinct was to cry, but I was holding that back because I could see the room full of people who I work with. So it was a dilemma I was living in that, oh, I cannot cry in front of these people, right? So I think that is how the news was delivered. And then after that, I was referred to a cancer center, a proper oncologist who would take things ahead. And as I said, because I had new people, they referred me within a day. And I think I could talk to the oncologist in 2 or 3 days, like get an appointment. And then they immediately referred me for biomarker testing, a PET scan, and then also booked me in for chemotherapy because they were just being very proactive in terms of what next steps would be needed. And then they just made sure that everything falls in place. We weren't, of course, biomarkers take a lot of time. So they did not wait for the test results to come back. They immediately already had started preparing for chemotherapy. So I think that aspect of it could be just that particular hospital or that particular doctor that they're so proactive. They know that we can see the diagnosis coming. So there's no point in waiting for more tests. I think that aspect I really liked because I could get treatment faster. But though I got fast treatment, I did not get mental space to just understand what is happening in my life and take in everything, which was so overwhelming. And I hear these kind of stories often. So I'm still debated about what is the best way forward because I know a lot of patients complain that things went fast for them. But then if you take my example, they were fast, but I complain about getting enough time to just process what was happening with me because I got the diagnosis and next week I'm starting chemotherapy and I don't even know what it means. I don't even know what this diagnosis means and what it will mean in my future. So I think there was a lot of processing that was needed to happen, but I just got straight into the treatment.
Mm, my goodness. I can imagine so many pros and cons because I do know we see this all the time in the community where people feel that they do want to start their treatment. But I've also seen the same in other people we've spoken to where, especially in earlier stage patients, one was diagnosed on a Friday and went in for surgery on a Monday. And there's no processing there, barely had the time to tell the family members what's going on and even understand it yourself. So when did you have that mental space to process your diagnosis? And I do also want to get into the chemo. Were you told how many sessions you would need, or what was your understanding of your diagnosis? Did you think, my goodness, this is me. I'm now going to have chemo. I'm going to lose all my hair, all those typical Hollywood images we get around around chemotherapy.
Yeah, so I think in terms of knowing what all I was going to go through, that did not happen because the doctor just, even before the biomarker tests came out, they started me with chemotherapy. So I didn't have idea of, okay, I'm going to take chemo, then surgery. I had no clue what we were going to do. I only knew that I would go through 4 cycles of chemotherapy. It was something called cisplatin and pemetrexed, and I would take them after every 3 weeks of gap. So I think after my first chemo session, which was, I think, lasted for 6, 7 hours, again, as I said, I had no idea what a chemotherapy means. So I thought, in my head, I thought that I would be sitting in a room where it'll be full of chemicals. More or less, I thought it would be like radiation. But then when I actually went for the appointment, I realized that, oh no, it's just a saline that is going to go in my body, which has all the chemicals, and I have to sit for like 6, 7 hours. So all of this getting prepared, that didn't happen. After the first chemotherapy and the wait period till the next, that is when I actually started to process what has happened, what does this diagnosis mean, and getting diagnosed at 26, what I wanted to do at that point in my life, and then now what I am doing. I was doing the job, so of course that has halted. I had a lot of travel plans, all different kinds of plans as a girl of 26 years old should have. So I think that is the time when I got to process none of that is happening, and I will just have to go through this treatment. And then, as you mentioned about hair loss, because I think that's the first thing that comes in, especially females, because we do really want to get an idea of how we will look with everything that's going to happen. And I don't think so. The doctors really prepared me for that. And one incident that I remember very well, and I think I'm never going to forget this. So when the doctor said that, oh, next week you're going to start chemotherapy, my first question, literally my first question was, am I going to lose my hair? And then the doctor literally just laughed and said that, I think you should be worried about more important things than your hair. And that really put me off. And then I, of course, stopped asking stupid questions. But I think that is what happens to a lot of people. For them, something else matters, and that is what they want to know. But then the doctors were like, we have much important issues to deal here. So
So sorry. That's really just so heartless because it just shows such a lack of understanding of the full experience. Of course, we want to treat our cancer first, but also what's important to you being normal, all those things. That's just so challenging. My goodness. I just had to comment on that because you don't often hear that kind of response so blatant.
this was happening also because a lot of people knew my profession, a lot of people knew what I am and what background I come from. So I think they just assumed that she should understand it better. But I think that is where the aspect of being a patient comes in, because as soon as you sit in the chair of being a patient, things just change for you. What really mattered for me was, oh, am I going to start losing my hair? Will I start looking different? Will I become weak? What all is going to happen to me? That is what exactly what I wanted to know, and not how are we going to deal with this cancer, because that has just recently been introduced in my life, right? So there is a lot of processing that needs to happen around that. And so literally after the chemotherapy, I got time to process everything. After the first cycle, I also thought about whether I should continue or not, because that is when I started reading a lot of literature, saw the statistics with this type of cancer and what can happen. And then I started thinking whether it's even worth it to go through all of this treatment and, you know,
Oh my goodness.
why not just live the rest of my life the way it is? So I think all of these thoughts started piling up. But because I already had started with the treatment, there was that aspect too, that I do not want to lose this opportunity. Maybe things will work out. So I think a patient always goes through these thought processes where they just want to live their life how much ever they can at this point, because nobody knows if the treatment will work out or not. But then, of course, I also wanted to give it my best shot. And I think, yeah, eventually at that point, I was heavily dependent on the people around me who definitely helped me to understand that no, treatment would be the best option to go ahead. You are fit right now. You can deal with the treatment without getting severely affected with it. So, of course, there will be changes, but nothing that I cannot recover from. So, I think that was the point. Friends and family came in the picture. They really pushed me through going ahead with all these thoughts and not stopping me from the treatment. And then I continued with the rest of the three chemotherapy cycles. And I think in middle of the second or the third, that's when the biomarker results would have come in. It's still unfortunate. Cancer is an unfortunate diagnosis overall, but I think because this was EGFR, exon 19, non small cell, so the doctors were trying to explain to me that we do have a treatment for this particular one, and quote unquote, still luckier than most of the people, so I should just go ahead with the treatment. But now there's this one good news that, oh, there's some treatment that exists for this particular biomarker. But the bad news instantly is, can you afford it?
Right.
Because
Right.
it's a drug which costs, oh my God, all of your life earnings, and you will have to take it for lifelong. So, can you afford it? My doctors tried me to fit into a clinical trial, but the staging, the typical what inclusion criteria for the clinical trial. I understand this, right? All of this now. Back then, I had no idea why they're not taking me in. And I was just really frustrated.
So Rasika, you obviously learned about your biomarker. Here you were in the middle of your chemotherapy, either session 2 or 3. So that's now taking some weeks to learn exactly what you have, and then you learn there is a targeted therapy. So what was that moment like for you, and did that change anything? And tell us more about Access in India, where you were living at the time.
All the news related to my diagnosis were 50% good and 50% bad. So I think when the doctors told me that I have this EGFR exon 19 mutation, and then there is a treatment available for that. That was good news. But then immediately the bad news was that the drug costs a lot of money and I might need to take it for the rest of my life. And now the question was, can I afford it? When you're going through something like cancer in life and somebody tells you that the reason you might die is because of money, how do you process that, right? Because now somebody is telling me that there is this drug which can save your life, but we can't give it to you. So it's up to you. If you can afford it, you can save your life. That aspect, to a 26-year-old girl who's started to work, earn money, you learn this is what life means. Because of course I had started working, I had some money, but nothing compared to what the drug needed. And there was no way my doctors could help me get that medicine. And then I know there were clinical trials on that drug happening, but I wasn't eligible to participate. So all of this information was just making me feel that how can a world be so cruel that there is a treatment out there, but somebody like me who's struggling and doing all that I can to live cannot get it just because of some XYZ reason. So I think processing that was the toughest part out of all the information that I got throughout my diagnosis. And I think that decision was the most difficult because in India, I don't know if it is in any other countries, but in India, there are some cheap alternatives available for that drug, which of course is not the best option, but it is an option. And you also take the risks coming with those options, right? So it's a win lose situation. You don't know what you're signing up to. You have to source that drug to you. It's not the most legal route. So now imagine as a patient, you're either struggling to collect huge amount of money to fund the actual drug, or you're trying to find ways to get this generic drug. I went with the generic drug that was available, and the reason being I was not at all in financial capacity, neither was my family to even try and generate those huge funds to get the original drug. So that was just out of question for us. So I did a bit of research with the generic drug. People have said they work fine. My doctor said we can give it a shot and see if it works on me or not. And the best way to see if it works was to see if I get the side effects or not, because that drug is not researched, right?
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah, such a crude method.
That's it's incredible. So Rasika, my goodness, what a whirlwind just to find out what was going on and what treatment you actually belonged on and the tension around can you even get this drug, right? Not just you as a 26-year-old, but very few people would be able to pay that kind of outlay without bankrupting themselves or it's just impossible to sustain. That is in its own really interesting conversation. So we're going to come back to that for part two. Thank you so much for sharing and letting us know what was going on and how you were diagnosed.
Thank you so much for having me.